Ladies and gentlemen, today's lecture is going to be on a topic that I've delivered before many times in 371. I don't do it every year, but it's one that's an important enough feature of work in software projects and indeed in teamwork and success in career that I wanted to hit on. Maybe someone could get the left light back there. This has to do with negotiation. There's a lot of misconceptions about negotiation. Negotiations are almost ubiquitous, okay, for IT projects and elsewhere in life. And I'm going to try to communicate to you without going into the management science of it, some of the intriguing psychology of it, etc., a few basic points. Negotiations are likely to be quite important for many of you in your lives. And one of the things to realize is it's not just a fighting for fixed shares of pie, zero-sum game. It's not just a battle for dominance. But it is possible to get what are sometimes called win-win agreements because the different parties in a negotiation care often about different things. The things that you care about a lot may be different from what the other person, the other party to the negotiation care about. What they can easily do is different from what you can easily do. The resources you have available are different than for them the knowledge sets. And as a result, you can end up in a situation where both of you feel really good coming out of it. It's not merely which dominates the other, but it's a matter of finding this kind of sweet spot where both of you feel it's a pretty good deal. Okay? And this is called a Pareto optimal agreement. It's where neither is leaving things on the table. And a key skill here is the ability to identify this, and it's fostered by dealing with multiple attributes. By thinking outside the box of salary, outside the box of due date, and think about multiple attributes at the same time in terms of flexibility, in terms of hours, in terms of vacation, or what have you. And often reflecting that in multiple offers, coming to the other party and saying, look, how about this possibility, or that one, or that one, or that one? You can take your pick. And that can communicate preferences. That can also give them some opportunities to think about what's best for them and can help them converge more quickly. And finally, it is critical, absolutely critical for successful negotiation to share certain types of information. Okay. So why negotiations in 371? Well, it turns out that in software, so much is done within this iron triangle that I've talked about, right? So the dollars, the time, and the scope, quality, or value delivered. And often there's negotiations for example, how soon you'll deliver based on dollars and based on the feature set, for example, with stakeholders, with clients. So if you're working with your first client or a later client, often there's going to be some negotiation about the terms of that agreement. There's negotiations, what goes into the requirements document, for promotions in a company, the share that you get in a partnership, where you work, from home or from office, when you're selling a company or when you're joining a company. These are often features in negotiations. And over the course of my career, I've had quite a few people come to me with very practical issues, where they're really at risk of being at loggerheads with another party and asking for some suggestions in negotiation. So misconceptions I want to put to bed that I've mentioned is the negotiation is basically a fight for dominance in a zero-sum game, that it's always best to hold one's cards close to the chest, sort of keep things hidden, and that it's more difficult to come to an agreement with more issues on the table. In fact, the opposite of these are true at a certain level. So it's not just a fight for dominance, it's an attempt to win, to get to a win-win. There are certain things you do want to hold to your chest, there's other things you don't want to. And the more issues you can bring to the table, often the greater chance you can get to a successful negotiation. So much of, there's a couple places in here which draw really heavily on this book, The Heart and Mind of the Negotiator by Thompson, which is a great book on negotiation. And Thompson identifies a number of specific, what he calls major sins in negotiation. One of them is for settling for too little. You walk away from negotiation feeling like a sucker. You didn't get, you made too many concessions, you could have gotten more, and you didn't. And he distinguishes that from leaving money on the table, which is really about failing to identify win-win opportunities. Not recognizing there's actually a possibility here that you could come to a successful agreement. Another major one is walking away from the table, particularly those who have a strong sense of pride, maybe feel insulted by the terms being offered, just rejecting terms that are being offered that could be favorable because of a wounded sense of pride or because of a sense of impatience or what have you. And then finally, settling for terms that are worse than your alternative. Often we have a BATNA, a best alternative to the negotiated agreement, that we can fall back on. And you don't want to sacrifice, you don't want to end up in an agreement which makes you worse off than that alternative. Okay, so good negotiation is difficult. I know people who teach negotiation professionally and are very good at it. There's some famous cases in my career where I've had the privilege of working with people who are unbelievably good negotiators. I remember one guy I used to do business work with overseas. We were working quite a bit at the time in Malaysia, doing some consulting work there. And he was traveling there an awful lot. And there was a certain hotel he loved staying at, but they didn't have a gym that he liked, and he really wanted a gym. He also was a voracious, this isn't quite the right word, but I'll use it anyway, a voracious drinker of Coke. So he would drink massive quantities of Coke, I think Diet Coke, but memory fails me. In any case, he would stay there, and often he would go there, and he'd have to go buy Coke in the stores there, and he'd end up not being really happy with the exercise option. So he negotiated with this hotel, with the specific hotel. He said, look, he will stay there on all of his future business trips, which were 10 a year or something like that, for 2 weeks at a time or something, if they give some concessions to him. So specifically, he wanted to be able to have a designated room that he goes to. He would let them know far enough ahead of time. And they should store in the room, in a closet in the room, an exercise machine and several stacks of Coke. So he negotiated this. And the hotel, they stood to make thousands of dollars a year from this. So they said, so you want us to have this closet, okay, and we'll store these things in the closet, and other people can use the room in the meantime? Oh, sure, no problem. Have other people use the room there. Just we'll lock the closet up, and so they agreed to it. They got thousands of dollars a year. He was a happy camper. He doesn't have to go buy Coke every time he goes, and here he has this exercise facility right there that he's got, and it was a great deal for him. Sure, it cost a bit more. He could have gotten a cheaper hotel or whatever, but it was just so convenient, and it spared him a lot of grief having to go search things out and to lose out on his exercise. So that's an example of someone thinking a bit outside the box. When you go to a hotel, you don't really think about that, so they could actually store something for this hotel, but it's a sign of a good negotiator. And I know other people have done similar things that I've worked with, and it's really impressive because you see them coming up with deals you wouldn't have expected that are obviously very favorable to both parties. Okay, so why is good negotiation difficult? Well, it's often a complex interaction between multiple parties. There's preferences between the parties that are often hidden and not really recognized. And there's emotional hooks. There's things you get wrapped up on, particularly certain issues you get tunnel vision on. So you get caught up in the salary side of things, and you forget salary is just a piece of it. You know, it's just one of many, many different factors. Or you get really caught up in, you know, in winning the argument about this focal point and lose the perspective on what you're really trying to achieve. And you know, some people enter into it with less confidence and they don't achieve as much. Okay, so let's talk about some of the key concepts we'll be tapping. 3 of them are listed here. One is the target price. These are sort of price conditions that you're seeking. And price is just one feature of many. The dollar side, again, is one we often get caught up on as a focal point. But when you're thinking about a job negotiation, give me some other things. So if you're negotiating a job, maybe a job with, you know, with a firm here in town. Maybe it's Vendasta or Zoo, or maybe it's Point 2 or what have you. Give me something else besides your salary that, you know, might be a thing you'd be concerned about, an attribute that you might negotiate about.
Vacation days.
Vacation days is a great one. How about another one?
Proximity to snacks.
Okay, good. I love it. So you want to like have an office that's close to the supply of screaming yellow zonkers or something like that. Okay, to each his own. Yeah. I mean, okay. So your location in the company, yeah.
Parking space.
Parking space. Hey, that's a great one. That is a great one. Another thing.
Equipment.
Okay, what equipment you have access to? So like your developer machine, something like that.
Location of your office. Window.
Okay, window office. Yeah, good stuff. Maybe the date you start, right? Maybe you want to start with them, but you really want to do that round the world trip before starting. You've had a dream of, you know, spending 3 months traveling the world, and so you want to start with them. They want you to start in June, but you say, look, I really want to start in September, and I'm willing to give up a little bit on vacation in the first year, what have you, for that.
There's always dental, optical, and other health-related benefits.
Right. Right. So maybe you through your spouse have access to a really good plan. You don't really need these, so they can skimp on those. But you'd like what you'd really like to have is good title, right? So there's all these different things that actually are at play, and we're shooting in our mind for some combination of them that sort of is our aim. You'd really like to have this, you know, these features or something along those lines. Now, I want to contrast it with a reservation price. This is going to be something where this is going to be a key threshold where you're willing to agree with them if they hit this point. And this is something you don't want to reveal. Okay, a target price might be something that you come up with as what you're shooting for, but a reservation price is this point that if they reach that, you're actually willing to agree, even though it's typically short of the target. Okay, so maybe you like a certain salary, but you're willing to settle for something less. And often, and if you don't get that, you'll walk away. You'll say it's not worth it. You know, if I can't get this sort of arrangement, if I can't get, you know, a decent arrangement for vacation time, or if they can't give me a better arrangement for pat leave or whatever, I'm not gonna take this. And often that's whether that threshold is based on your BATNA, your best alternative to the negotiated agreement. What might be the basis if you're negotiating a job? What might be the basis of a BATNA? Some alternative to it.
Job?
Yeah, your current job. Or you have another offer, right? Now mind you, this brings up an important point. One of the most difficult things to negotiate, in my experience, is one of the most difficult times to negotiate is if you're considering offers from places not simultaneously, so you can't consider them all at the same time, but instead sequentially. You don't know when the next one's going to come in. You don't know what your alternative is. if you have a bunch at the same time, and this is one reason to search for jobs, several simultaneous places at once, because you have an understanding of what the alternative is. Point 2 already gave you an offer for this with these terms, corner office, and this title and this really interesting project, and with this sort of vacation time. And now you've got Vendasta negotiating with you. You now have a fallback that is going to give you a sense of what your reservation price is. If they don't give me a certain combination of stuff, I'm going to turn down Vendasta because I'm safe. I have point 2, right? It's one of the reasons you want to do. You want to consider multiple things at the same time. And sometimes we have to consider them. I don't have time to go into this, but probabilistically. We know that, well, there's a certain chance I'll get an offer from X, and we're willing to kind of anticipate what that will be based on some early discussions. Okay, so a fair bit of my attention here is going to be spent on this issue of win-win situations. When do you get a situation where both parties are really pleased about it? Both feel they've gotten a good deal. And that's very readily possible because you're dealing often with multiple issues and different preferences about those issues from different parties. Maybe, for that hotel who stored the code, it was an easy matter for them to allocate that closet in that room. It wasn't a big deal. I think it was the room, as it turns out, that people in their hotel chain, when they came to visit the hotel to sort of inspect the local operations and deal with alliances or whatever, local alliances, they'd stay there. And so it was already a room which was set aside not for guests. And they had it, and they could offer it very readily. It was minor stuff. And as far as storing a piece of exercise equipment, sure, do whatever you want. For this guy, it was really valuable. It spared him a whole lot of grief. And to be able to store those stacks of Coke there, I think he had like 100 cans at once. That for him was the cat's meow. Okay? So the point is, different parties care about it to different degrees. Hotels one, I don't care. It's a similar thing. I remember negotiating when I was back as an intern. I remember negotiating where I lived with the company I was working for. So it was a large software firm. I negotiated, as part of my negotiations, I said, look, I know the firm has these housing which are really close by. I don't want to rent a car. I don't want to have to take a bus as I have in the past. So as part of my negotiations, I wanted to live at that unit within easy walking distance. And I wanted a high-powered development machine that I could use on my own free time for 1 day a week. And the company would provide it, so I don't have to purchase it myself. They have lots of these machines in their testing labs. So, for them, the cost is really low. Okay, they give me for my 4-month internship, they give me this machine. And as far as them, yeah, sure, have me in this housing complex. I mean, it's no better than anything else, no worse than anything else. So for them, no problem. For me, big deal, big deal. So often you have multiple issues and different preferences. And you want to get away from the sense that if the other person is getting pleased with the agreement, that it's worse for me. You want to avoid this zero-sum game sense, which sometimes gets into the psychology. Okay, this notion that they have incompatible interests. Okay. So common attributes. Well, we've spoken a bunch of dollars, time. So flexibility and arrival date, uncertainty and risk. We'll come back to. This is actually a central one, and it's a subtle one, but it's one that has deep implications. The convenience. So how far I am. The title, right? The duration of the contract. I'll agree to work at this company for a longer contract. I remember one internship, I negotiated a 8-month internship rather than a 4-month internship because I wanted to stay there extra time. Flexibility in hours, right? I want to be able to come in at noon and work till midnight or something like that. time to spend on other activities, rights to publication. These are all things that could be put onto the table. Okay. Now, given that there are these different attributes, and obviously these will be a bit different for different sort of contexts, there's often differences that go beyond the surface in some things. One is the ability to undertake a task. There's certain things that I as a potential employee am capable of doing. There's some things that only a company will be able to do. Now, and setting terms for benefits, comes to mind for this. Allocating parking, etc. There's certain things that I'm not going to be able to manage on my own, but they can do really, really easily. So often companies, by virtue of having access to certain types of resources or certain clout, can really easily negotiate things that would be impossible for me. Another issue, though, is this risk tolerance. If you're a large firm, if you're a well-resourced firm, there's things that often you can tolerate in terms of risk that others can't. Conversely, if one party is really knowledgeable about a situation and another is not, the knowledgeable party might be willing to tolerate risk on an issue that the other person is not. Give an example, right? If you're dealing with someone who's a computer scientist, they're trained well in computer science, there's a machine where there's a potential problem with some of the software that's installed. It may not be a big deal for you to uninstall it and reinstall it, or for you to configure the settings such that it's not a problem. Maybe it means you have to add memory to the machine. Maybe that's no problem for you. But for someone who's not a computer scientist, their willingness to tolerate that risk that it might not be up to snuff is very low. And so they might really want to avoid putting themselves in that situation, and they might just prefer to pay up front for the larger amount of memory rather than putting it in themselves if it becomes needed. So depending on your situation, your ability to tolerate risk, you may insist on certain options that other people are willing to take a risk on, okay, take a chance on. It's kind of like why we pay insurance, right? We put down money for insurance every month, not because we think we're going to come out ahead. We may have fire insurance or flood insurance. Typically, we're going to be paying more than we get paid back. We only get paid back if there's a fire or there's a flood or what have you.
Otherwise, they wouldn't make money.
Yeah, they make money for it. But you end up happier because if it happens, you are in bad shape if it happens, and that's when you need the money. They come out ahead financially. You come out ahead in terms of your satisfaction, in terms of your feeling, that you've shielded yourself from this risk. They're a large company. They can tolerate the fact that they have to pay occasionally for fires. You can't. If your home burns down, you are in bad shape if you have to pay out of pocket to replace the entire thing. They can tolerate it. They've got a portfolio of different clients, and they know statistically how often fires come up, floods come up, etc., based on recent historic data. So they can tolerate that really well. And this is a key thing, because often when you have negotiations between parties with different levels of resources, one of the areas they differ the most on is risk. And if you ever have to negotiate for construction, for example, the parties you're dealing with have different levels of knowledge and tolerance of risk. And sometimes just shifting that risk from one person to another leads both parties to be much happier. Time preferences, how quickly you need things done. A company may need you now because they've got that project which really needs an extra tester, starting next week in order for it to deliver reliably. Whereas your time preferences may be quite flexible in terms of when you start. And that difference can often lead to opportunities for negotiation. If you could join next week part-time before you graduate, they're willing to pay you, another $1,000 a month for salary on an ongoing basis. That'd be a pretty sweet deal. Expectations of outcome. So different parties may have different sort of senses of what will come out of this, and by negotiating back, by scaling back the scope or increasing the scope in ways that are easy for you as a developer, the customer is much happy. The customer doesn't care that much for you how hard it is to put in, but if you deliver extra value by putting an extra feature in, it may be a small amount of work for you and a big gain for them in terms of functionality. So they're willing to pay a lot for it. And availability of resources. Okay. I'll just highlight, for those interested in entrepreneurial side, there's different spaces, and sometimes I've given talks about this in 371, and we may yet see this, but there's different areas of the software market. There's folks who build custom platforms for companies. They go in, they build a platform for this company, the company totally owns it, and they go and they wait for the next job, and they build a custom thing for that, consulting firms. There's others that are service providers. They provide services. Others yet sell shrink-wrap software, sort of full solutions that they sell to many customers. And then there's semi-custom development. And semi-custom development is one of those that illustrates the feature of what I was just talking about in terms of outcome. With semi-custom development, you go into a given class of clients that are often have a lot of similarity. You deliver them great value for them. So in other words, you deliver them value with a software package that's great for them. And you continue to own the IP for it, the intellectual property. So you can take that code base and go to another one. They don't care that you're using the code base typically that was used for other clients, because after all, they get all the value out of it they would have otherwise. But for you, it's very small amount of incremental work often to do this next job for a new client. So for you, it gives great bang for the buck, how much time it takes. For the customer, they get just as much benefit out of it as they would for a custom solution. So this is a very nice market segment to be in, and it's one I've done a lot of work. You own the IP on an ongoing basis. You build up more and more rich libraries to deliver for clients in, pick your industry, insurance, pension management, veterinary practices, dental offices. You build up expertise in that, you build up software in that, you deliver value that's as if it's custom value for a client, and you keep the IP so it's really easy for you to do the next client. It's a really good option, and it has to do with this issue of sort of expectations of outcome. What are they expecting to get out of it? And they're willing to pay you for value. They don't care if it takes a long time. In fact, if it can be done quicker, it's a win to them often. Okay, so fostering these win-win conditions. How do you achieve that? Well, often, ladies and gentlemen, it comes down to adding new issues. I remember talking with folks who were connected with people who were doing geopolitical negotiations, and there, a lot of what they were trying to do is to add new issues to the table, to bring to the table, so there could be more dimensions of negotiation. If it's just one dimension, ladies and gentlemen, of negotiation, if it's just salary, it just comes down to salary. I want more. You, as my potential employee, want to pay me less. It's bad news. Then it's a head-to-head, zero-sum game often. But if you can add issues in, the timing, the location of where you work, the office location, the title, the timing of arrival, the duration of the contract, the terms of employment, the free time you have, then it often becomes richer because there's more ways you can configure things. Now, a second term has to do with formulating multiple package deals into particular issues. So, into many particular possibilities. So here the idea is we give several options. Look, I'd be happy with this salary, this vacation time, this title, or we could do it this other way. And the party I'm negotiating with can then have a set of possibilities. And they can indicate which of them they're most interested in. and you can start further tweaking it from there. Another issue is sometimes what seems to be a single issue is actually more than one issue. So you consider something like salary. Often in the salary is divided up, and this relates to the point earlier. In that one salary might be some assumed things about benefits. By decoupling them to have separate negotiation about benefits, you break up the benefits and you separately negotiate the benefits from the salary, you might end up in a better situation. They pay you more because you have good insurance coverage for your spouse, and you end up better off as a result. You're with a higher salary, and they pay net less because they're not paying the insurance costs for you. Focusing on differences in risk preference, what they're willing to tolerate and what you are. And then finally, contingency contracts. These are contracts that say, look, and this is a real opportunity for negotiation. So look, they don't maybe know you that well. They're hiring you for the first time. They don't know your ability to deliver that effectively. So they're going to be risk averse potentially. You know, you could be pretty good, but you could be a lemon. And they don't want to pay you as if you're really good up front. Because if you're a lemon, then they're stuck paying high costs to someone who's frankly not delivering a lot of value to them. So how do you deal with that situation like that? What could you do that would shield them from some of that risk? Well, in some cases, what you do is you put in place a contingency term. So, you know, contingent on achieving these objectives within the first year. Contingent on this performance, you know, after that, you know, I'll be paid X or something like that. So you build in a condition. If you achieve it, then they'll have the confidence they're willing to pay you more. And you actually have that as a part of a contract. These things are getting to be quite common in certain areas. In construction, things happen like this. You know, if they're doing this construction, they find a certain subsurface issue, then the cost is this, otherwise that. Something along those lines. These contingency contracts can be done though for software. If you deliver at this certain level, you will secure the following benefits. That's something which is a real opportunity for negotiation. So having a contract that explicitly takes into account uncertainties and declares how those uncertainties will be resolved. Okay, it shields them from that uncertainty, because if it doesn't happen, if you don't perform according to snuff, they don't have to pay. But if you do, they're willing to pay because they know you're worth it. Okay. Package deals. I had mentioned this. The idea here is that you care about several different things, so you'd be equally happy with several different options. Could be a higher salary, but less vacation time, and you know, a somewhat less lofty title or what have you, or you get more vacation time, more time to yourself in a lower salary. Maybe each of those you'd be equally pleased with. So the idea is you present several alternatives that you're equally pleased with, and you see which of them interest the other party. This serves a couple of gains. The first thing is it communicates your preferences to the other party. And secondly, it can help you converge more quickly to a solution. It can help converge, because they're considering multiple options, say, okay, that's one we could talk about. These other four, they don't really like, but this one is one they could talk about, and then you tweak that. Okay? Gives a perception of flexibility. It gives a sense that you're willing to negotiate. You're willing to sort of make some trade-offs and listen to their preferences. That's a really good thing to communicate. So it's not a head-to-head. You know, you're listening to what they're saying. You'll hear their interest and negotiate accordingly. So thus it can help sort of overcome the sense I can't give up things. It gives a sense of multiple options. And you know, it lets you zero on a proposal for refinement. At first, maybe they're crude, but then you zero in and tweak things for them. And you know, it does show a certain amount of respect for the different viewpoint of the other parties. Okay, so multiple packages and this idea of unbundling to more than one issue is pretty important. Having multiple issues on the table. Now another issue is this issue of communication. Okay, it's not always desirable to hold your cards close to your chest. There's certain information you don't want to reveal, like your reservation price, and certainly you do. One information you definitely want to reveal, mark my words, is the priorities. Your preferences. What do you care about the most? You want to be very upfront about that because you want them to be thinking creatively. If you really care about vacation time, or you really care about having that day a week they have at Google for you to do whatever you want, then make that clear, because that might allow them to come to the table with some alternatives that can really help you, that can really speak to your interests. So you want to communicate your preferences. You want to communicate your priorities, okay? And providing that sort of info sometimes leads to them to reciprocate, the other party to say what their preferences are. What you don't want to reveal is your reservation price. You know, why not? Why not say, you know, you'll sometimes get this, particularly if they think you're a naive negotiator. They'll say, you know, what sort of salary would you be aiming at? And if you mention your reservation price, which is the amount, you know, you'd be grudgingly willing to accept it. You're not going to walk away for that. What do you think they're going to do? Give it to you, or give you something a little bit less and see if you're willing to do it, right? They're going to aim at that. There's no way they're going to go above that, because they're going to, or it's unlikely, because they're going to be thinking, okay, we don't want to have needless concessions, right? Where we offer more than that. He's willing to come for this. So you want to be very cautious about mentioning your reservation price. Do not confuse your reservation price with your target price. You can mention your target price. You know, I'd like a much higher price, as long as it doesn't, you don't think it's likely to shut down the negotiations. But if you mention your reservation price, they know they can get you for that, and it's going to be really hard for them to get them to go anywhere above that. So this is another thing you do not want to reveal. You'll get this asked sometimes in job interviews. So, you know, who else are you interviewing with? And what are they offering you? Don't answer that. You do not want to be telling them what someone else is offering you. Why? Because, you know, okay, so they're offering you, you know, 40K. The chance that they're going to offer you a lot more than 40K is limited. So if they know that you have a certain alternative, and that's your limited alternative, they're not going to be really tempted to go much above that. They know that you don't have an alternative that's 75K that you could go to. So, you know, in terms of information, communicate priorities, preferences, and then often risk concerns is really quite important. They can shield you from certain risks that you can't shield yourself from, and you might be able to shield them from certain risks. An example being what you do in terms of contingent contracts. You know that maybe you are a superb scholar programmer. They don't know that. They see your resume. So they're a little bit nervous about giving you that big salary, so you say, okay, fine, do a contingent contract, contingent on my performance for the first 3 months, you know, with me hitting these milestones for this project I'll be leading, then we'll have my salary go up after that, if I meet all those guidelines. You're confident you can do it. They're not sure. You've shielded them from that uncertainty. Okay. Now, the notion of Pareto optimality comes in here, and it has to do with this notion of win-win. It has to do with, you don't want to be in a situation where you leave money on the table in the sense of not identifying a win-win situation. And the idea is, look, we don't have one perfect outcome because there are trade-offs between what the different parties obtaining, but we can at least rule out obviously bad outcomes, cases where one party is, where both parties are definitely worse out, okay? So we're going to try to rule out outcomes that give consequences that are inferior with respect to both sides of the negotiation, okay? I say all attributes, but that may be preferences of multiple people. And so in this context, we talk about an efficient frontier. So the idea is, look, we have maybe two people here, and there's going to be options for person one where you cannot get any better for person one without, you can't get any better for person one going this way here without getting worse for person two. But at least you don't want to be settling in a situation where both of them can be improved, that you can improve person one's gain without harming person two. This is a situation where you can improve both person one's gain, we're going along this x-axis in a positive direction, and improve person two's gain by a certain change. And this is called the optimal frontier here, where you really can't improve one person's outcome without worsening the outcome for the other. You can't go this way on the x-axis without worsening person two, without going down the y-axis. You can't go up the y-axis without lessening person one. The goal here, though, is to end up with something on the efficient frontier. At least you don't have obvious things that can be done to improve it without harming either party. So you're trying to find these win-wins that lie on this efficient frontier where both parties, there's no better thing that's dominated by this. And we talk about these things being dominated here. These ones are dominated by this one in the sense that this one is better for person one and it's better for person two, this guy here, compared to this one. So we say this one dominates that one. Okay, so what are some negotiation tips here? We have limited time left, and it's a deep topic. Well, prepare. You want to go into negotiation prepared, and you'd like to know the other party, what's their batman if possible? What's their best alternative to the negotiated agreement? What are their other options? Maybe they have another person that they could hire if they don't hire you. Maybe from their perspective, that interviewer perspective, you have other jobs. They'd love to know what other options you have. You want to have a clear sense of what your batman is. What alternatives do you have to this? What is your reservation point? What's that point or set of points where you'd be comfortable agreeing to this and not walking away? And you want to be thinking outside the focal points, outside salary alone or benefits alone. You want to be thinking about those broader set of issues. Okay. And you want to try to maintain a clear sense of where you're shooting for with them. What are you going to ask? What are you going to ask for? And you're going to be, particularly if you're negotiating over time, you may have other offers coming in from other firms. And you're going to be wanting to think, okay, what other options are there, and actively search out other options. Actively bring other options in that would serve as an alternative. Scanning for alternative placements that you might be happy with. So it's very important you don't take a negotiation personally. I remember talking with one person years back who was really taking a negotiation with a firm personally, and he obviously felt keenly, insulted that they were asking for certain terms. That's not going to be helpful for negotiating effectively. You want to understand what their constraints are, their preferences, and what your preferences are. And you may walk away. That's fine, but you don't want to get emotionally wrapped up in it in a way you can't negotiate flexibly. You want to share your information about preferences and priorities. And you want to have some objective basis for this position. This is an important thing. Often in your negotiations, you'll want to have reference to a clear number that you can give them, not as your only alternative, but as an example. So you could say, look, 3 years ago, I got more than that salary that you're offering. 3 years ago, I had a higher salary than this. It gives them a clear sense that you're not just pulling numbers out of the air, and it gives them a sense of, okay, this person has got some clear basis for choosing a certain range of numbers. We can't squeeze them down much further than this. Don't confuse your target and your reservation price. Do not mention your reservation price when they really would be best to give your target and then be held accountable for it. And they say, oh, okay, so you'd be willing to come here for 40K? We can do that. Now you've stuck yourself in a more difficult situation where you have to renegotiate that. If you want to ask for something, if you want to give them something, give them your target, and that will put them in a situation to say, well, it's too high, but let's see what we can do to work out. Don't give your reservation price. You'll be probably pretty unhappy if you go for your reservation price. If you get your target, great. But if you get something more than your reservation price and less than your target, you may still be doing pretty well. Discuss multiple issues at once. Don't be stuck on the salary alone. Don't be stuck on, just the timing of your arrival. And understand what uncertainties you're exposed to and uncertain about and averse to. Bunch of comments in here. This is from Thompson, which is great, where he suggests a bunch of questions to bring to the table. What focal points could I get caught up on? What things could give me tunnel vision in terms of emotional hooks that I'm going to be caught up in a negotiation that's going on live, and I'm not going to be able to think outside the box. You want to be careful about this notion of a sunk cost. What's a sunk cost? Anyone know? People often get caught up in this on sunk costs. Look, I've already put in so much effort to this. I need this to go through to kind of make it feel worthwhile. The sunk costs are efforts already expended or costs already made, and often in negotiation there's a emotional baggage associated with them that you need this to succeed to make up for them. And often, instead, you should be asking, what's best going forward? Okay, those costs, they're gone. They're gone. It's not going to undo them to have a successful negotiation, but emotionally, they often distract us. Okay. Well, I could go into more on risk preference. All I'll say is that different parties have very different sensitivity to risk. Often those who have less access to resources are more sensitive to risk and are more risk averse as a result. An example of this, ladies and gentlemen, might be the following. Suppose I were to tell you that I have a coin, which, and you're assured that this was true, that with 51%, it flips heads, and 49% it flips tails. And I were to ask, and suppose I were to set up a game where, suppose with this 51% chance, someone could win $1 million and 50% chance could lose $1 million. Okay, if you lose it, you owe $1 million, and if you win it, you gain $1 million. Do you think Bill Gates would be willing to play that game? Sure. $1 million. I mean, he loses that in the first 5 minutes after the stock market opens in the morning. I mean, it's peanuts to him. And with 51%, he wins $1 million. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So for him, it's a money-making deal. Seriously good. On average, does he win? Yeah, on average, he wins, right? He wins, for each coin flip, on average, wins 1% 1% of $1 million, which is $10,000. Not a small deal. Would you be willing to flip that coin?
No.
Because losing $1 million is like bad. I mean, winning $1 million would be great, right? But losing it is really bad with a capital B, right? Suddenly you're in debt for $1 million to Osgood, no less, right? He's gonna be after you. Yeah, no, that would be bad with a capital B. So the point is, you may say, well, you earn money through it, yes, but you're risk averse because you have a preference function which is really, really negative for negative numbers because you don't have many resources to spare. Bill Gates, for Manulife Financial, for big firms. Are you kidding? That's a great coin. It's a great coin. Flip it, flip it, flip it. But for you, something you want to avoid. So risk preferences are different between people. It's not an issue of what the underlying situation is. Is it good or is it bad? It's actually how tolerant we are of this based on our position. And it turns out that people's risk preferences are different. Their willingness to tolerate risks are different, and that evolves over time, it turns out. And different companies have different. But more than that, your different knowledges often will tell you what for me seems like a big risk, for you seems like a small risk. Because you know more about the situation. And when you're dealing with, with firms, for example, they don't know you as well as you do. So again, they don't have the confidence of what you can do perhaps as much as you do. And as a result, they may be risk averse in that time frame. You don't know what the working environment is going to be like there. They do. And it may be that you want to put in a clause that you can, after 3 months, negotiate what team you're on or whatever. Because you're not sure what their situation is. They are, and they're willing, they know that you're going to be happy because 95% of interns are happy. So put this in. Point is, we have different tolerances for risk. We have different knowledge which clues us into how big a risk it is. And as a result, it can be very rational for people to pay risk premiums to shield themselves from risks that other people are willing to tolerate. They're willing to give up some money on average to shield themselves, just like you're willing to pay insurance. And there's a whole theory of this. The whole theory based on utility theory and risk attitude and so on, preference functions that I have handled at times, and give a real sense as to sort of why people are so happy paying insurance, why people pay risk premiums, etc. But we don't have time to go into that today. Okay, so that's all for today. Again, as a recap, for next week, the presentations will be on